got to say congratulations on being the person behind such an important film.
Oh, thank you. It's definitely a team effort on something like this, so I'm happy to take the credit, but it's this one really was all hands on deck, so to speak.
Definitely. I have to ask, though, what made you decide that you wanted to make a movie about Eugene Smith and what happened on this journey?
In fairness, it wasn't really Eugene Smith that was the driver for making the film. I've been a huge fan of Smith's work since I was, pretty young. His images had a majesty to them, and a hope, and a sort of view on the best of humanity and the best of all of us when faced with some of the hardest and worst things, and that always struck me, and so I was always a huge fan. But it was actually the Minamata story and the people of Minamata, and that as I learned more about them, just found it so inspiring, and felt that they could be a sort of a call to action and also a call to inspiration for millions of us around the world, really for everyone around the world who've been, in some way feel that their voices have been taken away, or in some way feel that they're marginalized, and we're all under attack in a sense, in terms of what's happening in our environment, in terms of the way corporations often are acting and dealing with the environment, and these people were so inspiring to me, and their story was so inspiring in the way that they rose up against all odds, that I wanted to tell that story, or a story like it anyway. And the fact that I could, at the center of it, and ultimately the way in, was this incredible singular artist who had a view into the world that's unlike pretty much any artist that we've ever seen. That was incredibly exciting, because it allowed for me to tell a story, allowed for us to tell a story or take an approach that could be quite, beautiful and poetic, and something that you wanted to lean into and lean forward in your seat rather than, lean back or turn away. So in many ways, Gene was the vehicle to tell the story through, and not necessarily the focal point for me.
When did you first hear about the people of Minamata? Because it's not a story that we've heard very often here in Australia. It didn't really make much of the news services or anything here in Australia. So how did you first hear about the story?
Sure. Well, I heard about the story, of course, through Smith's photograph, and or through a number of the photographs, but in particular, his image of a young girl in the bath with her young girl who was a Minamata victim or patient, in the bath with her mother, and it was that image that had inspired me all those years earlier, and so I was aware of it because of that. I mean, his work worked on me, and I wasn't alive when he took that, but many years later when I came across it, it stuck with me. And just, the thing I will say is that part of choosing this subject is that the Minamata mention and what happened off the back of this story, and this is an ongoing story, right? There are patients and victims all over the world, in particular in Minamata, Japan, who are still fighting, to be recognized and heard and taken care of. But actually, in many ways, this story is a very positive one, because the Minamata Convention and most of the world signing it and acting upon it is one of the few times that we've actually had a collective agreement around the entire world. and it is a blueprint for what we can and should be doing. I mean, it's quite interesting in the time of COVID, you guys have done an incredible job in Australia and New Zealand and other parts of the world have done well, but not as well as you guys have. And we're in a time when the world really needs to stand together and look at these issues collectively. And Minamata and the response to it, many years too late, but nonetheless after Smith's work came out and after these people fought to be heard, is actually a great beacon of light and success.
Yeah. Talking about issues like that, I know that you're a patron for the Wilderness Foundation and I'm a patron for the Palm Oil Initiative, so we both have a great love for the environment and wildlife. Did the fact that this was an environmental tale make this a little bit more personal for you as well as a filmmaker?
Oh, 100%. Without question. I mean, all of my work, I feel like it's a responsibility of artists not to preach, not to make speeches, not to, pen editorials, but to do your craft and make sure that the work is nutritious in some way and make sure that what you provide to audiences is, entertaining and exciting and thrilling and fun and gorgeous and all of those things, but also offers some progression in their lives, offers some nutrition, some ability to leave a theater and have something to think about and feel inspired and all of that. And if no one's going to, in many ways we're living in a time with the news media being corrupted, and obviously I'm a big supporter and very concerned about how journalists are being treated and what we need to do to rectify that and make sure that truth and integrity is protected. But I think it's our responsibility to speak to these issues and show people what's out there and what's happening. And this felt incredibly important to me. It feels incredibly important to me. And I hope that it can be, I hope that this film can inspire especially younger folks who don't necessarily have the confidence or haven't seen the stories that fill them with hope and fill them with that passion to stand up and be heard. I hope that this film accomplishes that, because more than anything, it's meant to teach you something, it's show you something, it's meant to thrill you, but it's meant to fill you with a feeling that you really can make a difference.
Definitely. And I think that's such an important message here as well, because we've seen here in Australia that it is the younger generation that are taking a real stand against climate change. I don't know if you've seen the news, but we actually have fairly regular strikes here now where high school students will strike for the day and go to their local political office and try and get an audience with the local politician to talk about climate change. So I think films like this are so important for Australian teenagers these days.
I think you're right, and it is fantastic what those kids are doing. It's amazing to think, I come from a generation where, if we all cut school en masse during the period of time that I was in high school, when I was a teenager, we weren't protesting. We weren't engaged in the same way. There's been a long time since younger people have been engaged in that way.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic to see that happening in so many places around the world and them taking a stand. It's wonderful, especially in the way that it's being done right now.
Definitely.
It's great, but I think that, I think that showing these kinds of stories hopefully will continue to push those kids to stand up and feel confident and be heard.
Definitely. Andrew, I've got to ask as well, you mentioned that you were a huge fan of Eugene Smith for a long time. At what point did you come to the realization that Johnny Depp was the perfect actor to portray Eugene Smith on screen?
Sure. So I love so many actors and so many great artists. They're quite, there are some fantastic actors working out there, but there are almost none that have the built-in hope and love and compassion for others and youthfulness and joy that Johnny has just naturally in his life. And it's the reason I think that people are always so drawn to him, in his whole career. Whether it's, he's playing, some sort of quirky character or, any of the characters he's played, the thing that is never far is that twinkle. And with him, the twinkle represents real hope, real love, the real belief in other people, the best in people, and all of that. And so when thinking about Smith and a guy who had been through so much in the world and seen so much, but yet still maintained that view on mankind and that positivity, it felt like, there really is no other actor that I can imagine that could have pulled off this role in the way that Johnny did. I mean, almost anything you throw at him, you still feel it. It's almost like, you watch him in this role and you see him wrestling, almost fighting that instinct, that trying to keep a lid on that joy or that love and that compassion, and he just can't. And watching that struggle on screen, I think, is in particular when it's inside of a character like this, is incredibly dynamic.
Definitely, and you've got such amazing actors around him as well. What made you decide to go with the actors that you went with, especially the Japanese cast, because they are absolutely fantastic in this film?
Thank you. Yeah, one of the wonderful gifts that was given to me, given to everybody involved, was there was a real commitment among the Japanese artists in particular. When word got out that we were making this film, and making it in a way that was not just respectful of Japanese cultures and history, but also, Benoit, my DOP, and myself, we went to great, and all of my departments, we went to great lengths to make sure that tonally, this was a Japanese film. That this yes, it was made by some Westerners, but it really was a Japanese film. And when we started talking to these actors, they were all excited for the opportunity to do something meaningful and to push this agenda and bring this attention in Japan in particular, but also obviously around the world. And so we had this just amazing opportunity to cast anyone that we wanted, any of the Japanese actors. They just were all available to us and all excited to be part of the story. And even down to the extras, every extra that you see on screen auditioned for the film and did their homework, and they're not extras really, they're actors. They're participants, they're not, window dressing or, the camera doesn't move by them. They're used, they're part of the film. And it was an incredible gift. And every one of those actors, from the amazing Jun Kunimura to Ryo Kase to Asano Tadanobu to, of course, the great Hiroyuki Sanada, these guys, and Minami, of course, who's transcendent in my opinion, but they helped out. They went into the art department. They painted signs with our art department. They helped the younger actors. They helped us with story. I mean, they were really committed. We had a family on this set where everyone was pulling in the same direction. And it was just remarkable. And one of the great gifts of my lifetime is working with those particular, the Japanese actors in particular on this film. I mean, I'll never, their level of commitment was just remarkable.
Definitely. And Andrew, I know we are running out of time very, very quickly, but I would love to ask before I go, is there anything you would like to say to our listeners out there before they sit down to watch this amazing film?
That's a good question. I'll tell you, we made a film that we hoped would be the sort of film you could bring your, I don't know what it's rated in your part of the world. They do the ratings differently everywhere. But the intention anyway was to be able to bring, your 10-year-old or your 13-year-old to the theater, and also your 90-year-old grandma to the theater.
Yeah.
And have everyone go together. It's not a family movie in the sense of it's not the Jungle Cruise or that sort of thing, but a film that I believe will be appealing and nutritious for kids of a fairly young age, and obviously adults all the way up. And I hope that people support the film and that they enjoy it, and that they look to their own communities and they feel strong. And their communities can be their school, their communities can be their neighborhood, their communities can be their cities and their countries, and so on and so forth. And there's things to do, and we all have battles to fight. But I guess at the end of the day, this film is meant to represent that we're all in it together, and we really are, one world. It's sort of cliche at this point, but it's somehow something that we forget. So, that's about it.
Definitely. Well, the film certainly does that, and I just want to thank you again for taking the time to come on our show today, and for making such an important film that I think is going to speak to a lot of people here in Australia.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's my pleasure to speak to you, and I appreciate the support very much.
Not a problem, mate. I'll let you go, but have a great day, and hopefully we get to talk again in the future.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, care. Mate. See you later. Bye.